Hey, my name is Cedric, and in this video I'm going to show you how you can set up Google Analytics 4 for your website using Google Tag Manager. Now in this video we're actually going to be doing something called server-side tracking, so really cool thing, and I'll explain a little bit further in this video the difference between browser and server tracking, but basically at the end of the day I'm going to be showing you both, and then you can pick the tracking method that you prefer. But this video is going to be really valuable because I'm going to share things with you that people don't really talk about it on the internet. So I'm really pumped to share that with you guys, and I'm just going to ask you to give this video a thumbs up, and what that's going to do is going to allow other people just like you that need and are looking forward to set up GA4, and they're going to be able to find that video. That's just how the YouTube algorithm works. So really appreciate if you can give that video a thumbs up. And what I'm actually going to do is I'm just going to go over like the agenda of this video, because there's a few different things that I want you to understand. I want you also to understand the process so that you don't skip anything, and then after watching this video you have a setup that's just working. So I'm gonna remove my face and I'm just gonna go over like the agenda of this video. So here's the agenda for this video. So the first thing we're going to do together is create the GA4 property. So we're really starting from scratch here, and if you already have a GA4 property you can just skip to the next section. So I'll make sure to have everything properly labeled so that if you've already done a certain thing you can just skip to the next thing on the list. But I do recommend that you just watch the entire video because I set things up in a really unique way. So yeah, I just recommend that either way you just watch the entire video. So the second thing that we're going to do is create the GA4 web tags. I'm going to help you with that. I can even give you a template that you can just download to import all the tags, variables, and obviously some triggers, but not all of them because you're going to have to create some of them. And I'm showing you how to do everything in this video, but you do need to know how to use Google Tag Manager. So this video is not on how to use and navigate the tool. So you need to have some experience with Google Tag Manager. If you don't, no problem. I actually made other videos on this channel showing you how to use the tool, what are tags, what are triggers, and what are variables. But if those three words that I just mentioned, variables, trigger, and tags, do not ring any bell to you, the video might be a little bit too advanced for you. So I recommend you check out some of my other videos, like I said, or just type Google Tag Manager on YouTube and you should be able to find plenty of videos showing you how to use the tool. Now, once we have those GA4 web tags, we're actually going to be creating a server container. So the GA4 web tags are in what we call a web container, but we need to also create a server container because what we're trying to do in this video is something called server-side tracking. And that's basically, instead of using Google Server and having Google trying to request information about your users, we're going to be doing things server-side with our own custom subdomain. So that's just a really great way to keep tracking in the first-party context. And in this day and age, that's what it's all about. It's to keep things first-party. So that's what I'm going to be showing you in this video, and that is just like the preferred way of setting up Google Analytics 4. So once a server container is there, I'm going to show you again how to create that custom subdomain. So that's a pretty cool thing to do. And then once that's all set up and connected, I'm going to show you how to create something called a client, and that's all done inside your server container, and also how to send the data to Google Analytics 4. And on top of that, we're also going to do something called Proxy GTM. So if you've ever installed the regular web container on your website, you notice that there's two little codes that you need to add, right? Well, if you look at the script, you're actually loading Google's server and their library, but you can actually proxy that. And instead of typing like I don't remember exactly what it is, but it is a Google domain, and I'll add a screenshot here so that you can see the script. But so instead of actually using that script, you can change it and add the custom subdomain that I'm going to show you how to create. And now you're like loading Google Tag Manager, but like on your server. So again, it's a great way to just keep not just your GA4 tags and that side of things first party, but also GA4. So you're basically we're trying to remove all traces of Google Tag Manager, and that's kind of what we're doing. And then the last step, and that's probably one of the most important ones, because if you don't do that, then your whole setup is not going to work. But it's actually deploy your server. So there's certain like upgrade script that you need to run inside your console. And again, I'm going to show you exactly how to do that. So this is definitely going to be a technical video, and I just want to say this now before you go through the effort of watching this video maybe 3 to 4 times, scratch your head, maybe lose some hair, trying to set everything up, that we actually do offer this as a service. And if you'd prefer just hiring us to have us set up everything for you, that is also an option. So you can actually click the link in the description of this video, and then there's going to be all the information that you need there to understand exactly what our process is and how to move forward with that. So if that's you, if you'd like to have us set up everything instead, that's something that we do. And we also provide a really cool like reporting dashboard that you can use as soon as we're done the setup, so you can start analyzing your data right away. So just want to put it out there that if ever you want to go through the effort of setting all this up, that is something that we can do for you. But anyways, for the rest of you that want to go through all this setup, well, let's actually get right into it. Okay, so I am now in my GA4 demo property. And if you don't have a GA4 property, just go to analytics.google.com. And if you have Universal Analytics property, you're gonna see your Universal Analytics account right here. Click on admin, and then you're gonna click on create a property. By default, when you create a property, it creates a Google Analytics 4 property, as they're saying right here. So just give it a name, set your reporting time zone, you add your currency, and then you can just hit next, and you're gonna be able to create the property. Once the property is created, you can actually go to admin right here and click on data stream, and you're gonna be able to get what we call a measurement ID. So that's something that you're gonna want because we're gonna use that inside Google Tag Manager. So let's actually go to Google Tag Manager now. Okay, so I am now inside my demo Google Tag Manager account, and I'm just gonna navigate to tags and type GA4 here. So all we see are my GA4 tags, and I'm just gonna give you an overview of my current setup. So we can see that I'm sending an add to cart event to GA4. I'm sending the basic that's responsible for sending a page view to GA4. Then we've got the purchase, view cart, and view item. And what I've actually done is I've created a template that you can download, and you can just import it inside your Google Tag Manager, and you're gonna have access to these tags that you see right there and some of the parameters. So I've actually done some of the hard work already and added all the different parameters that you would wanna add inside something like a purchase event. And it's easy. All you have to do is, again, download the template, which is going to be in the description of this video and potentially somewhere here on the screen, so the link to download it. Then you can go to import containers, then choose the file that you downloaded, and then you would want to choose your existing workspace, and then I recommend that you merge it, and then you should get all my tags, some of the triggers, and then also variables. So going back to my tags here, let me again just type GA4 just to filter them. So as you can see, those tags are actually made for an e-com store, and I want to show you how you can tweak them so that it might be a little bit more relevant for your business and your industry. So let's say you're actually a service-based business. Well, you might not actually want to send purchase event. You want to send a lead event. That's why I'm going to show you this really great article right here, and it's also going to be in a description of this video, and it's actually giving you all the different what I call standard events that you can send to GA4. And here we got the purchase event, but we also have something called generate lead, and then it also tells you some of the parameters that you would want to send with a lead event. So we have the currency and the value. So let's say that I, again, am a service-based business and I'm not sending purchase. I could actually just change the event name here to generate_lead, and then potentially only keep the currency and the value, and perfect. Then that's my lead event, and obviously changing the trigger so that it only triggers a tag when someone becomes a lead. Now, all those different parameters in there, as you can see, I've added a few of them. So the USD, I just added a static value, but you would want to add probably a variable, especially for currency, value, transaction ID. Honestly, all of them, it's best to actually use a variable like the event ID. And you can grab that variable from the data layer, ideally. If not, potentially can also be done using just a custom JavaScript variable. But I honestly really recommend that all this different information get pushed to the data layer, and then you can access it. Now, one that is a bit tricky is the items parameter name here, because if we go back to this article and we click on purchase, if we look at the items parameter name, it's actually need to be created in like an array. So I'm going to click on array, and you're going to see an example here. So the items needs to be containing this. So basically we've got lots of different information about that product that they've purchased. So that's where it gets a bit complicated and technical and tricky, but this is just how they want you to kind of like structure the data. But you actually don't need to add all this information. I'm just showing you really best practices, and ideally in a perfect world, you send all this data, but you could honestly just send a purchase event with nothing. You wouldn't really get much to analyze inside GA4. Like you wouldn't really get the value and potentially different currencies and all that kind of stuff where you can understand what is the average order value. If you're not sending the value, right, you can't know that. But if that's just not something that you can do at the moment, and you just want to have a setup and at least start tracking the amount of purchases, but not the total, you can just send a purchase event. And then inside GA4, you can look and see how many purchase events you got from, let's say, the UTM source Facebook_ad. So what I'm saying is that you can still have a working setup inside GA4 without sending all these different parameters name, but it's obviously best practice to send them. Now let me go back here, and I'm also going to show you the GA4 basic here. So right now I've actually have this checked, and what this does is that it sends the information to the server container. Now we're not there yet, so I'm just going to leave this unchecked, but then later in this video I'm going to come back here and check this once we have a server container created. Now don't forget to change the measurement ID if ever you're using my template. I think the one that I put in a template is like 123. So you want to go inside your GA4 property and then copy your measurement ID and then paste it here. Now, if we go and look at fields to set, I have a few different fields that I've set there for you. One of them is first party collection. I set this to true. The other one is event ID, and that is a variable that you get if you download the template. And the last one is a page URL. Now, the reason I'm actually giving you the event ID is because I've actually made another video on how to do server-side tracking for the conversion API. So sending information to the Facebook conversion API. We actually use GA4 to send those server events. I don't want to get too technical and too much into Facebook tracking because I made another video, like I said, on how to do it. But if ever you've watched that other video and now you're trying to learn more about GA4, that's why I added the event ID. And if ever you don't have a server-side setup for Facebook as well, the event ID is going to be really useful when you want to do something called deduplication. But again, you can learn more about that in the other video that I made. And then the link of that video is going to be in the description of this video. So let me back out here and I can actually save it. Now let me just show you the add to cart. So opening this up, so I've got the page location, right? Page URL, that's the page URL. Currency, I set it to a static value, and same thing with the value. It's a static number. Like I said, you want to use a variable, and like I said, ideally that variable is a data layer variable. And if you want to learn more about like data layer and custom JavaScript, I made another video where I show you how to send advanced matching information to Facebook. And in order to do that, I talked about the using custom JavaScript. Even if you don't know how to write JavaScript, I show you a little tool that you can use that helps you create and capture information from a page. And then I also talk a bit about data layer. So you can get more familiar with those two concepts by watching that video, which is going to be in the description of this video. Sorry if I'm mentioning a lot of different videos here. It's just this is a technical thing and I wouldn't really have enough time to cover everything in this video. But that video that I'm referring to is going to be a good resource for you to understand custom JavaScript using Google Tag Manager, and then also how to pull information from the data layer. So go ahead and watch that video if you need to kind of understand data layer and custom JavaScript. But if we scroll down here, we have the same thing that we have inside the purchase event, which is an items, which needs to be an array. And then first party collection, that's already set to you. Action source, we can leave it to the website, right? Unless this is not happening on a website, but most likely it is. And then we have the event ID, which you don't really need to do anything. And then of course you want to add your triggers to all your different tags. So for you, you might not be using a custom event. So what I'm doing is I've created a custom event inside my data layer. So whenever someone adds something to the cart, it actually sends what we call a custom event to the data layer, and then that's what I use as my trigger. So I say whenever that there's a custom event with the event name add to cart, then send my add to cart tag. For you, you might not have a data layer, or you might not have that event in a data layer, so you might actually be using a button click. So when someone clicks the add to cart button, that's what triggers your tag. There's honestly a lot of different ways to send your tags. Just make sure it works for your setup, and make sure to verify that you're using the right triggers is actually what I'm saying. So going back there, this is my setup. Like I said, you can actually download and use this setup. And what I'm going to put on the screen right now is actually a list of all the different standard events that you can send to GA4. So GA4 is pretty nice. They already created a long list of events that we can potentially send. And let's say you want to adapt this setup for your company and your industry. You can actually just open up one of my event tags and just change the event name. And like I said, go to this article right here and open up that standard event, let's say join group, and see what you actually need to send in terms of parameters for that event. And that's how you can kind of customize my setup to make it work for your business. So this is my GA4 setup for web tracking, and I could actually just go ahead and submit that and call it in, and I would have a working system. But what we're trying to do here is something called server-side tracking. So I'm not done, but you could just go ahead and publish that, at least even for now, so that you start sending data to GA4. So what we're going to do next is actually create our server container. So I'm going to navigate to admin, and I'm going to hit the plus button, and then you can just give it a name. So I'm just going to name this, let's say SS, and then you can choose your server container and hit create. So already been used, so SS demo 2, let's call it. Perfect. So now I'm going to click on automatically provision tagging server. You're going to need to add a billing method to your Google Cloud. So server-side tracking is not a free option. You do start with like a credit. It's going to last you a certain amount of time, but it is not a free solution. But I strongly recommend that if you're a medium-sized company, that you do use server-side tracking, especially if you're running Facebook ads or any sort of like advertising and you rely on good data. I recommend that you do server-side tracking. So I already have a billing method on file, so I'm just gonna select this one, and then I just click this. And now I'm probably gonna see this for the next 5 minutes, so it does take a bit of time. So it's a perfect time to actually just go ahead and go grab a cup of coffee. But I'm gonna pause this video, and I'm just gonna resume once it's all loaded. Great, so it's finally done, and if I actually click this icon here, I'm going to be able to open up Google Cloud Platform. But before I do that, I just want to show you this right here. So by default, when you create a server container and you add a billing method, Google's going to give you a server that you could use, and I could use that and do server-side tracking with no problem. But the reason why we're doing server-side tracking is to keep things in a first-party context, and that's just a random URL that Google gives you. So I want to use my own server URL, right? Keeping things first-party context. So I'm going to go to my Google Cloud Platform project. But before I do that, I just want to show you, if ever you exited this by accident, you can always access it back by clicking this. And then again, clicking the icon to going to Google Cloud Platform. I actually always recommend that you use this icon to access your Google Cloud project, because if you go to the URL directly, you might actually land in a different project, and you might think that you're working on the proper project, but turns out you're at the wrong spot. So that's how I usually like to navigate to my project. So now click on the navigation menu, and let's scroll down, and we're looking for App Engine. So right here, and hit settings. Now we want to add a custom domain, so add a custom domain, and you might actually see your domain here. If you see your domain there, perfect, just select it and hit continue. If ever you don't see your domain there, then that means you need to verify your domain. So one of the best way to verify your domain is by navigating to something called Google Search Console. Right here. And if ever you're like, I have Google Search Console, like why is it not verified? Well, you might not be logged in here with the proper account, right? Maybe you're using a different Gmail for Search Console, I don't know. But if it's connected, so that's me, Cedric, because that profile is connected to my Search Console, I can actually see all my domains there, right? So if I'm going to open this up, I can see all my domains. If ever you know you have Search Console and you don't see it, again, try maybe logging into a different account. But Search Console is a really great way to verify your domain. So all you have to do is create a property if you haven't done so. So I'm just gonna name this test3.com and hit continue. Now it's gonna show this up, and basically all you have to do is place, so let's just say GoDaddy, and what I need to do is add a TXT record to my GoDaddy. So let me actually just select any DNS provider. So all I have to do is copy that TXT record, go into my domain name provider, for example GoDaddy, and I just need to paste that. Might take an hour or two. Then after that, I can hit the verify button and my domain is going to be verified. Okay, it might take actually up to 24 hours, but as soon as you paste the TXT record inside your DNS provider, try to hit the verify button and see if it works right away. But again, it can take up to 24 hours. So as soon as that is verified, you can go here, reload your page, and you should be able to see your domain. If ever you don't, then you might want to contact your DNS provider and ask for some assistance to install Google Search Console on your domain. Okay, so now I'm just gonna select my agency's domain here, and this is where you add your subdomain. So here they're giving an example, subdomain.yourdomain.com. So here, make sure that you create a subdomain that you haven't used yet. So if ever you're already using something called ss.yourdomain.com, do not use that. It needs to be empty, but it could be anything. You could name it banana. So I could name it banana.vertexmarketingagency.com, and that would work well. For this example, I'm just gonna name this, let's go with the test 3 again. So I would just recommend that you maybe don't name it something like tracking, just name it like SS or client. That should be good. Now I'm gonna hit on save mappings, and I'm just gonna really just check to see if I can actually use it. So perfect, I'm getting a green check mark, so that means I'm good to go. Now if I hit continue, it's actually gonna give me a bunch of different records. Now I'm gonna need to add all these records, but not the CNAME. I'm gonna repeat that again. Do not add this last one here. Add all these ones, but do not add the CNAME record. If you add the CNAME, based on my experience, it will crash your website. So again, do not add the CNAME record. I can't stress that enough, because I had to learn this the hard way. I crashed my website the first time I set this up, because when I set this up, there wasn't really any proper documentation on how this whole thing works. So again, do not add the CNAME, only these record right here, and it's gonna work perfectly fine. As soon as you've done so, you're gonna hit the done button, and you're gonna see it's gonna load. Might take 24 to 48 hours, but then everything's gonna be good to go. Now, when you see that it's not loading and it's like showing like I think it's a check mark, then that means that everything is okay. So you can actually grab your custom subdomain here. So I'm gonna Control C to copy it. And you can go to admin, and again, I'm in my server container right now, not my web container, and click on container settings, and you can actually update this. So right now it's giving me the default one. That's the one that I get by default when I create a server or a container. But what I can do is I can actually just paste mine right here. So you're gonna want HTTPS, so you always need to keep that there. But then you can add your custom subdomain that you just created and hit save. Now, since this is a demo, I'm just doing this to show you how to do it. I'm actually not gonna save that, because for me, I'm going to use this default URL here, because I'm not going to add those DNS records inside. I use Cloudflare, so I'm not going to add that inside Cloudflare, because again, this is a demo. So I'm going to remove that, but you would add it there and you would save it, okay? And whenever I'm referring to the server URL, I'm referring to the server URL that you created inside App Engine. I'm going to be using this one, but you keep using the server that you just created. So I'm just going to copy this, and perfect, I can just save it, although I didn't really make any changes. Okay, so now we can actually start creating our GA4 client, and also create our GA4 tag that's going to be responsible for sending the data. So I'm going to go ahead to client, and I can actually see there's already a GA4 client created. I'm going to remove this one since I'm not going to be using Universal Analytics in this video. But GA4, that's the one that I want right here. And we're actually gonna check this option right here. So default JTag.js path for specific IDs. And I'm gonna go and add my measurement ID. So going back here, copying this, and just bring it in here, and then I can actually save it. So perfect. So now we actually have a GA4 client. Now I can create my tag. So the tag is responsible for sending the information to something like GA4. So I'm gonna add a new tag. I wanna have a Google Analytics tag. And again, I'm adding my measurement ID. We're gonna keep this to false. And here under event name, I actually want to be using a variable, right? So the event name that I'm going to be sending is whatever the event name that my client is receiving from my web container, right? All this GA4 web tag that I've created in my web container. Hopefully this makes sense. So, but basically what I'm trying to say here is that you actually need a variable, and it's the variable called event name. That's great. Now the trigger, I actually want this to trigger whenever my GA4 client receives information. So I'm gonna create a new trigger, and it's gonna be a custom trigger type on some events, and we're gonna choose built-in variable, and it's when the client name equals, and I believe right now that GA4 client, it's named GA4. So we're gonna say GA4 as our trigger. And let me just name this GA4 trigger so we know what the trigger is for. Save. And perfect. So basically what's happening here is whenever my GA4 client receives information, then it's actually gonna pass that information to my GA4 tag here, and this one is responsible to sending the data to this measurement ID right here. So that's good. I can actually just save it, and I can use the default name. That's fine with me. So the next step would actually just be to adding your server URL inside your web container. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna duplicate this. So I have my web container on one tab and my server container on the other tab. And I'm gonna go to my web container, right? So right now that's my web container. And one great way to know the difference is here I don't have a client, right? And this one here, we see a client. This one doesn't have it. So I'm gonna go to tags, and all I have to do here is go to my GA4 basic, and then open this up. And remember when I first started the video, I talked about that there's an option to send the information to server container. Well, this is what we're doing right now. So I'm gonna check this, and all I have to do is add my server URL. So I'm going back here, I'm pasting this one, but again, you're pasting the server URL that you just created in App Engine to keep things in a first party context. I'm just doing this because this is a demo. Then I'm adding this right here, and then I can actually go ahead and save it. Now, what this is actually doing is it's telling my web container that moving forward, whenever there's a GA4 event, always just send it to the server, and that's kind of how it's working. If ever you don't want that, let's say you want to send some events via browser and some events via server for whatever reason, you could actually just uncheck this, and you can add a new one called transport_URL right here, and then you would just add, like, you would just paste your server URL right here, and then for whatever event that you want to send to GA4, just add a new field called transport_URL, and again, you put your server. But that's not what I'm doing, but I just want to give you this option if ever you don't want to send all your events via the server, because obviously the more events you send via the server, the more it increases your cost inside Google Cloud, right? So they actually charge you based on usage. So if ever you're sending tons and tons of different events, then you're going to be looking at a higher invoice at the end of the month. So removing that, adding this here, and I can actually go ahead and save this. So here you go, I now have a server side set up, but now I'm gonna show you how you can actually proxy GTM. So I'm going back here, and if ever you do not want to proxy GTM, that's fine. You can actually just go back here and uncheck this, hit save, and honestly just publish anything and you'd be good to go. But I want to show you how to do it. So I'm gonna hit save, and we actually need to add a new client. There's a few different ways actually. So if I hit new, I could actually use this one right here. but there's actually a better template that I found, and I'm gonna share that link in the description of this video. So I'm gonna go to templates, and this is actually the file right here. So what you wanna do is open this up, and big thanks to Simo for creating this. So right click, and you can actually just save it, and make sure that it gets saved as a .tpl and not a .txt or anything else. If not, it's not gonna work. So again, make sure that you save it as a .tpl, and the same thing for the template that I gave you. You don't wanna save it as a .txt. So save that. Once you have it saved, you're gonna go back to your server container, you're gonna hit template, and what we're trying to do here is we're actually trying to add a client template. So we're gonna hit new, and you're gonna hit the 3 dots right here, and we're gonna import one. So like I said, I actually call this template.tpl. So we're gonna import this right here, and you should see something that says GTM loader. So that's the one. If that looks good, then you can hit save after agreeing to the community terms. And that's good. Now if I go to client, and now we can add that new client tag right here, right? GTM loader, and we can also change the request path. So you could actually name this whatever you want. It could potentially be banana, it could be testing. Really, it's up to you. So I'm just actually going to put test here, but let's say the name of your company is, I don't know, best barbecue sauce. You could just potentially put bbq.js, and that's what you use as the request path. So I recommend that you change it instead of leaving it to default, which is gtm.js. So this looks good. You don't really need to do anything else here. So I can actually just go ahead and save it and just use the default name, which is GTM loader, and I'm good now. So the next thing that I want to do now that I have this custom client is to actually go here. Probably remember those 2 scripts if you've installed Google Tag Manager on your website, but now you're going to make some small modifications. One of them is actually just changing the source URL here, and you want to add your own custom subdomain that you created in an app engine right here. So go inside your website, edit your code, and change this and add your own custom subdomain. I'm gonna do it, but I'm not gonna be adding this one right here because, again, this is a demo and I did not went ahead and added those DNS records. So I'm actually just gonna use the default server URL that Google gave me when I created my server container. And if you remember, we just edited this, right? So with the help of our custom client, we're able to change the request path, and in my example I changed to test.js. So you just go ahead and add whatever request path that you added here, and then that's exactly here. So instead of gtm.js, for me it would be test.js, and in the body tag we don't have really a gtm.js here, so all you need to do is simply change the server URL. So I actually have my Shopify store right here because I've used Shopify to set up my demo store. So if I go to online store and I click on themes and I edit my code, but again, this will work, doesn't matter the platform, as long as you're able to just edit the Google Tag Manager script. Now I believe I have this store in a snippet, and I just have it stored with my data layer. Now if I scroll all the way down, this is actually my first code right here. So here again, I'm using the URL that Google gave me. And here I have my test.js. So everything's good here. So I mean, that's already saved, so I'm okay with that. And if I go to theme.liquid and I locate the body tag, here I have my Google Tag Manager. And then again, I changed it to the server URL right there, and you do not need to add the gtm.js or the test.js here in my example because we don't have a gtm.js. So all that is saved. If you're also using Shopify, just don't forget that for Shopify you need to go to your settings as well and go over checkout, and you potentially also added the GTM script right here. So in the additional script input. So go ahead and again change the source URL, and in the gtm.js change it to something like test.js. Well, that's what I have. So this is for changing and proxying GTM. Now if I go back to my server container and if I just hit preview, it's gonna load my server there. So you should see your own custom subdomain here. If you don't see your custom subdomain, if you see another domain, then that's because you need to go back here, hit admin, click container settings, and then add your custom subdomain here. Make sure it's HTTPS, and then you can save it. If ever you're previewing everything and you're getting like, I don't know, like a 404 error or any sort of errors, then that's probably because you did not add your DNS properly. So go back here, check your DNS records that you need to add. Remember, you don't need to add the C name, just only add the A records and the AAAA records. So those are the only type of records that you want to add. But 99% of the time when I'm working with the client and we're previewing this and when I'm getting an error, it's not because of something other than the DNS records not properly being added inside your GoDaddy. So if that's your case, just contact GoDaddy, contact your webmaster, and just like ask them for some help, because that's a problem. So here I'm previewing my server container. So I'm going to go back to my web container, and I keep the preview on, and I'm going to preview my web container now, and I'm just going to add my website URL. And perfect, so we can see that there was a connection. I'm opening up the preview for the web container now, and if I click on container loaded, perfect, GA4 basic was able to load and send. Now, if I open this up, we can see that there was actually a page view event, right? Because that's what we're sending, page view event, and we have the client, and it sent a tag, right? Tags fired. We have our Google Analytics GA4, and I have this checked right here so that I can see the value, and we can see that it sent an event name called page view. Now, if I go to my site and I'm just gonna add a product to my cart, I'm not gonna go through all the different steps because this video is getting long and I also have other things to show you. So I'm just gonna show you the page view and the add to cart. So right now I just added something to my cart, and again, I'm using a custom event, right? So if we open up the data layer, we have an event that gets sent, and the value of the event is add to cart, and that's what I'm using as my trigger. You could potentially just use a button click as your trigger. It doesn't matter, but I'm using an event. And here on your tags, I have my GA4 add to cart event. So it was able to send properly, and we can even take a look at all the different parameters and their value, right? So I didn't change it. I just set it to static, right? Static value, static currency. And I mean, it's fine just for testing, but obviously we already talked about that. You want to use variable. Going back here, obviously we viewed a few different pages, and now we have an add to cart event, right? Add to cart event. Opening this up, we were able to send an event to Google Analytics 4, and it's called add to cart event. And cool, we're basically doing server-side tracking now. We're using the web container to send the information to our server URL, and then after that we have a client accepting and collect that information, and we're using a tag inside the server container to send that information to GA4. So it's pretty cool, because if I go to my page right here and I inspect the code, and let me just type GTM here, we're not using Google server, and we're also not using gtm.js, right? So we're kind of like hiding Google Tag Manager, and we're keeping things in the first party context as much as we actually can. So this is for the setup. So that was actually one of the cool things that I wanted to share with you, was to change the server URL right here, and also be able to rewrite the request path and change it to whatever you want, like in this example, test.js. But we are not done here. We still need to do one of the most important thing, which is actually upgrading the script. So changing it from development to production. So I'm just gonna go back inside my server container right here, and then I'm gonna click on this little code here. And then, like I said, one of the best way to open up your project is by clicking this icon here. So now I am opening up my project. And if I look at the top right here, it says activate Cloud Shell. So this is actually how we're gonna be able to upgrade our server. So I'm gonna click on that. Now it's just gonna take a few seconds to load. Okay, so it finally loaded, so we can see my information here and also my project. Now I'm just gonna paste this script right here. You can find the script in the description of this video. So take a good look of it. That's exactly, oops, didn't mean to click on that. So that's exactly what you want to copy, okay? Now I'm just gonna click enter. And then we just wait a little bit. Then it's giving me a pop-up here. Just want to verify that it's me and I authorize this. Perfect. Now it's just loading all the information, and we should see some data back in just a few seconds. Perfect. So press enter to continue. So I'm going to press enter. Now it's asking for the container config URL, and it's actually already giving it to me. So I don't need to click anything. I can just actually type enter. Policy script URL, this is optional, you don't need it. Since it's a demo, I'm not going to add anything there, and honestly you don't really need to add it, so you can just again click enter to skip it. Request logging is currently on, we're going to leave it to on, so again enter. Now deployment type, right now it's set to testing, so you would want to change this to production. So you can just type production just like that. I'm going to type production, I'm going to click enter, but I won't actually finish it since this is a demo and I don't want to change this to production. Auto scaling, we're going to leave this to on, so great. So minimum number of servers. So Google Cloud actually recommends that you have 3 servers. We're going to actually use their recommendation, so I'm just going to type 3. And then maximum number of servers, they recommend 6. So again, we're just gonna follow the recommendation. So I'm gonna type 6 right here. CPU target utilization, we can actually leave it to 0.6. And then now it's just saying that, hey, are you agreeing with all these different changes that you made? If you do, just type Y and then hit enter. Now I'm not gonna do that because again, this is a demo, but you would type Y and then it's gonna take about 5 to 10 minutes and you're gonna get a confirmation message. So big congrats if you've made it this far. Like, you now have everything that you need in order to do server-side tracking for GA4. Now, if ever you got stuck somewhere, because like I said, it is a pretty complicated and technical video, well, you have 2 options. Option number 1 is you can actually get in contact with us and we can actually do this entire setup for you. Or if ever you just need like more of a smaller answer and you think that's something you could potentially figure out yourself, if ever you had a bit of guidance, we actually do have this free community. It's called coffeeandmarketing.org. The link is going to be in the description of this video, but you can actually just go ahead and ask your question, but I guarantee we will get back to you with an answer, and that could be another option if ever you are stuck somewhere. So just to recap what we've done in this video, we've created our Google Analytics 4 property, and then from there we created all our different browser tag inside our GTM web container. And after that, we created a server container. I showed you how you can create a custom subdomain, right, to keep things first party. Then once that was working, we actually added that custom subdomain inside our GA4 basic tag, right? So if I go to GA4 basic tag, we open this up and then I just added my server container URL right there. And then not just that, I actually also showed you how to go inside your server container and add a custom client called the GTM loader so that you can load the entire GTM web library on your own subdomain and remove the gtm.js file. After that, I showed you how you can go ahead and test both of your server and web containers. And then the last thing that I showed you is how to actually change your Google Cloud project from testing to development so that you can actually start sending all your data to Google Analytics 4. So guys, that is it for this video. Hopefully it was valuable. And if you'd like to receive content like this every week, really consider subscribing to the channel because that's what we do. And like I said, if you got stuck somewhere, consider joining our free community called coffeeandmarketing.org because you can actually send like URLs or images or videos inside your questions. When I get comments on my YouTube videos, it's really great. Sometimes I can answer them and give you a great answer, but most of the time, especially for something as technical as this, you need to be able to share a screenshot or a URL so that I can fully understand your question and give you a great answer. And unfortunately, the YouTube platform doesn't allow users to add links or images or screenshots. So again, if you have a question, I recommend that you join this. Like I said, it's completely free. But yeah, that is it for this video. Bye for now.